Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name's Kevin, and today we're gonna break down a full Packer brisket into the two sections: the fat, the point, and the flat, the lean. The reason I'm doing this is I've been cooking a lot of brisket and it's getting into the winter time, so I wanna make sure I take advantage of a good deal when I'm at the store, like $3 a pound for that full Packer, but I wanna be able to, portion out my cooks a little better for the winter time because my neighbors won't be out. We're not going to be in the backyard atmosphere. So I want to do certain things with the point and certain things with the flat and cook them up different ways, experiment with different rubs. And I'm going to do this in the off season so that when I do go back to cooking a full Packer brisket, I know which rubs I like the best, or if I really like making burnt ends. This is a time to experiment, and it's also a time to take advantage of a good price. Before we get started, make sure to check out ComparisonCooking.com. This is the place you're gonna find all the latest videos and newsletter, and very soon, the barbecue journal. So you're not gonna wanna miss it, so make sure you check that out. We're gonna jump right in this video and let's just take it away. As we get started, you wanna make sure you're working with a secure area as best as possible. So you take a wet paper towel and you put it underneath your cutting board. That's gonna stabilize your board a lot better. All right, another important thing is to have really sharp knives when you are trimming a brisket or any cut for that matter. I like this tool, it works really well for me. Jumping into the brisket, this is obviously a 13 pounder at just under 40 bucks. So $3 a pound, you gotta love that. Now open your bag however the best way possible. Today, I try to pull it out from the top to keep all the juices in, but of course the brisket started to stick to the bag and it wasn't as effective as I was hoping it was going to be. But just do whatever it is you got to do. Make sure to pat your brisket down, your cutting board. You want to dry this out a little. Just get any really slippery spots taken care of so you're working with a real clean piece of beef. And now you want to start inspecting it, all right? Start getting a game plan in your head. I'm trying to break this into two pieces, the flat and the point. So right away, I'm looking for pieces I know I want to get rid of, like that one odd piece right there. Any of that oxidized meat there, I don't like it. You can keep it on there, but just personal preference. There's plenty of beef here, so I can get rid of it. As you start inspecting and seeing what you want to do, one of the things I like to do when trimming brisket is keeping my knife on the board as much as possible and just kind of pulling back and using less of a saw motion. It's just very comfortable to do for some reason. I'm going to put this in my discard pile, but I'm going to go through all the meat of my discard pile later to see which meat I want to keep and fat I want to keep for maybe making tallow or any other type of burgers. So make sure you keep all your scraps, and I'm gonna go through it later. So this is just to remove anything that is really jumping out is where I like to start. So I'm definitely cutting that back because I don't want any of that. And I have enough beef here, enough brisket that I can really take pieces away, and I'm still gonna be left with a lot. I'm just gonna keep working, inspecting it, seeing what cuts I wanna make. And these are the preliminary big cuts I just want to get rid of because I know I'm not going to keep that as my two leftover pieces. Just keep cutting back, taking small cuts or big cuts, but preliminary small cuts to see what you're working with. And good Lord, look at that. There's just something about a brisket. That's beautiful right there. You start seeing that internal marbling on the point side. I literally can watch these videos all day. It's mesmerizing working with brisket. So little cuts here to get rid of that beef that just looks a little off. Even though it is not off or bad, it just doesn't look good. All right, on these Walmart briskets, the flat towards the end never has a lot of beef. And for years, I've cooked these and the big cut I'm making here looks huge, but 9 times out of 10, nobody really eats that end flat piece there because it's just too thin. Look at that. That's really gonna cook down. It's gonna be too hard. Nobody's gonna enjoy that except your dog, which lucky for your dog, because it's still delicious. It's just not the primary cut. As you can see, it's still thin there, but I'm gonna be a lot happier with that as the end point of my flat than that really thin piece that we just cut off. Now we're back to inspecting where we want to make that cut between the flat and the point. You see that big piece of fat going through there. Where do I want to make my cut? And you just want to take your time and inspect it to see where you're going to make the first start of your cut and where you want it to come out. And I'm just trying to position it so you get a good angle with the camera and can see what I'm doing. That's why I'm going back and forth here. And now I normally would cut this flat, but because I'm trying to show you, I lifted it up. That's why I have it at this angle so you can see where I'm making this cut, and just trying to follow that fat line, leaving more fat on the flat side because there is, no marbling inside this flat piece, the lean, whereas the point has some nice inner fat running through it. Now there is more point that I could have cut and continued to go down. So I did cut short there, but I don't know what I'm gonna do with the point as far as the way I cook it yet. But I know with this flat, I'm gonna cook it like a traditional brisket, and I'm really not upset about leaving that extra point at the bottom there to help give it some insulation for that long cook. So now I'm just going over, inspecting again, seeing what cuts I want to make next, where I want to trim this, and you can just see the grain, how it's going different ways. And that's where breaking it down, it's important to understand the different way the cuts go. So just continue throughout this. I mean, it took 20 minutes to cut this whole thing down, and that's with recording. So realistically, it probably would have taken 12 minutes without recording. You just want to continue and inspect it, and then just remove the stuff that's bothering you, like those spots on there were really starting to throw me off, so I want them gone. But I don't want to over trim this because, like I said, I don't know exactly what I want to do with this yet. I'm gonna vacuum seal it, freeze it, and then research and really have a game plan of how I want to cook the point. So I'm just making trims that I know ultimately, no matter how I cook it, I'm gonna get rid of this meat, or I should say fat. But overall, I do wanna leave a lot of the fat on there, just in case the recipe I decide to cook requires additional fat and you don't need to trim it way, way down. So that's why you don't see me completely trimming all the fat off of this. Inspecting this, I know no matter what recipe I cook, I'm not gonna need that hunk of fat that's just protruding out of the middle like a little mohawk right there. So I am gonna remove that. And you can just see the way the grain is going on this point. It's just going a complete different direction than the flat. And that helps you get an understanding of why brisket is, as a whole, is so hard to cook, is you're dealing with two muscles going in different directions, and that throws people off. So it is important to get a deal from the store, get home, and break it down sometimes, just so you have a better understanding of the whole protein you're working with. So as I said before, just beautiful fat going through here. Not trimming it all because I don't know what I'm going to do with it yet, but trimming it enough to start getting a real good look at the protein there. And like I've mentioned many times before, here's a good illustration of the way the grain is going on both these different muscles. Now, I should have cleaned up my workspace earlier, but I'm putting all that additional trimmings in a plastic bag for now. I'm going to go through that and really pick out the pieces I want to save. This is just an illustration before I get out my vacuum seal bags. All right, now I got more working space once again. Inspecting the flat. What do I want to do with this? I know I want to trim the flat pretty good because I will be cooking it like I would traditionally cook the whole Packer brisket. So I'm gonna just start removing excess fat that's not gonna cook down right there. And right underneath of that, you can see that there's still some of the point left, but I'm okay with that. It's a backyard brisket. That flat's gonna get some protection with that point on the bottom there for that long cook it's gonna get. And then any of this silver skin left on here, any of that feathery fat, you just wanna get rid of. So you just take your time, remove it, and then you start inspecting it and continue to remove different spots of it that just look off, or you want to cut down some of the fat. Didn't like the look of the skin right there or fat, so I took that off. But for the most part, I like to keep a good amount of fat as a barrier for when I'm doing my flats. This will be going in the freezer, so I will go back and see before I cook it if I want to trim up any more of that fat. But for right now, I've broken it down enough to get this in my freezer after a good vacuum seal. Now, here's the important part about vacuum sealing and why this is a crucial kitchen item you want to have. It just goes such a long way for preserving your food and being able to go to the store, see a 40-pound brisket that's 14 pounds just about, and purchase that. And now you can go home, break it down, and really be smart about the way you're cooking and preserving your food. So I highly encourage people to jump all over and get a vacuum sealer, because then you can take advantage of these deals when you go to the store. And like I said, I'm going through that bag and looking for meat I want to keep for burgers later. I have multiple bags like this in my freezer from previous trims. So that's it. There you have it. You want to just break it down, save as much as possible for the next time you want to break it out of your freezer and get to cooking. All right, folks, that's it. That's how you break it down in a very basic way. Like I said, I wasn't getting too granular with getting it really fine and to the point, because I want to leave it with some fat in the freezer. And then as I come up with the different strategies of how I'm gonna cook this food, when I take it out of the freezer, I'll be able to either trim it further down or leave it all intact, depending on the way I'm gonna cook it. So that was just a very basic way of doing it, and I want to show you that don't be afraid to steal a deal from the store and then break it down so you have a better cut, and then leftovers for hamburgers and other things you want to experiment with. You guys, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you keep up with all the things we're preparing this off season for our next season backyard barbecue. As always, leave me a comment below on what else you might want to see, and hit the big thumbs up button, and I will see you guys very soon.